I would like to call to order the local planning agency for the village of Tequesta. Today is November 17th and the time is 5:30. And Lance, could you do the roll call, please?
Jan Strand, Steve Egan, Elizabeth Shower,
Here.
Leslie Dasher,
Here.
James Hackett, Teresa Maggio,
Here.
Sherry Ambrose,
Here.
and Jean Magadan.
Here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. Tonight we are missing our chair and our vice chair, so at this point we need to have a chair appointed for this evening. If there are any nominations at this time.
Nominate Liz.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
All in favor? Can we have a roll call,
Aye.
clerk?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay.
Roll call.
Yes, please.
Elizabeth Shower,
Here. Yes. Sorry.
Leslie Dasher,
Yes.
Jean Magadan,
Yes.
Teresa Maggio,
Yes.
Sherry Ambrose.
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like we have our chair. At this point, we can move on to the approval of tonight's agenda.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. The next item is approval of the minutes. The previous minutes was for May 19th, 2022. I'm hoping everybody read it, and are there any corrections, additions, or may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the previous minutes. I second.
Roll, please, Lance.
Elizabeth Shower,
Yes?
Leslie Dasher,
Yes.
Teresa Maggio,
Yes.
Sherry Ambrose,
Yes.
Jean Magadan.
Yes.
Okay. The next item is for the agenda is the beach road design guidelines, and I will have Nelsa take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The design guidelines of the Beach Road Corridor Initiative started, so I can see everybody. Initiative started in May, approximately in May 2022 this year, and per Village Council direction. As part of the process, we had two public workshops. One was conducted on June 29th, and the second one was conducted on October 3rd. Those public workshops were attended by village residents, mainly from Beach Road, but also in general from other areas of the village. The design guidelines is part of the package. And then the main areas of the design guideline is the building design, site planning, landscaping, public streetscape, and I would say one of the most important part is the design guidelines checklist that is on the appendix of the document. I'm sure you have seen this document. It has pretty much 80 pages. I think it has like 80 pages. Yes, 80 pages. So, and at this point, I would like to ask to the board if you have any questions with regard to the design guidelines.
Okay. Teresa?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Sherry?
No questions.
Okay. Well, Jeannie, you live on Beach Road.
You're right.
Do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay. Leslie?
No questions.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank whoever, I don't know if my other members have looked at it, but, all right, I just lost the page. The sources that, I spoke.
57.
Pardon me?
57.
Thank you. I knew I should have put a yellow tag in here. I mean, it's 3.5 pages, and I did check out some of the websites, especially from the other countries, and I was definitely impressed. So whoever put that together, I do have to compliment them because it's very detailed.
Thank you so much. Yes, these design guidelines was a dedication and work, and we are pleased. And this is the first step for the approval process. So thank you so much for the compliments.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Nielsen.
If
Do you want,
if you don't have any questions,
do you want to
we
do
would
like a
to-
presentation of what's in here for the people that are in the audience, or?
Well, if you have the design guidelines in front of you, so we did not prepare a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Because we would like to focus on the ordinances that are the next ordinances.
Okay. I would just like to know, have any of the people in the audience gotten to see any of the designs that we have now? Okay, all right, fine. So at least I know we're all on the same page.
Some of us are, some aren't.
I'm sorry?
I apologize, some of us are and some of us aren't.
Okay,
So
all
Ms.
right.
Shower,
that's fine.
just to be, so I did not get a chance to look at the design guidelines. For the record, my name is Brian Seymour. I represent Island House. The problem is they just got posted. I have not had a chance to review them, not just like today, but they've not been done for the last months. There was a PowerPoint from, I think, the summer, but the guidelines themselves are referenced in an ordinance, but they weren't attached to the ordinance that I had. So I've not had a chance to look at them. So other people may have had a chance to look, but we certainly haven't had a chance to fully evaluate them. So
Okay.
for that.
Well, I can say that when I met with Nielsen and Lance last week, I did have them make
Last week.
several changes because I didn't like certain designs. So maybe that's why they were in delay in doing that.
It's certainly not I'm not blaming anybody for this.
No,
just
I
an answer to the
understand.
question.
Totally, that's
Madam
fine.
Chair, I just would like to clarify that the agenda with the attachments were posted on the website last week. So, so they were posted on the village website with all the attachments since last Wednesday.
No, I understand that. I have not, the question was, have we reviewed them? The answer is I've not had a chance to review them. 1 week
Okay.
would not have been enough anyway. So that's.
That's fine.
That's all.
Okay, totally understand. All right, okay.
At this point, we should open up public comment.
You want me to open up? We're not going to read the ordinance, or?
This is.
This is item number 1.
Okay, oh, all right, okay. I know that we have people from the floor, Lance. And I just want to say it's 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Bedell. I live at 350 Beach Road, Island House Northeast. As Brian said, we haven't had a chance to really study all the design guidelines, although we have met with your staff and we've gone through some of them. You know, as you all know, Island House is probably the oldest building left on the beach that has not been bought by somebody for redevelopment. And probably the building that's most likely, maybe the only building that's going to be impacted by these guidelines and these changes for the next 10 years on the beach side, because 100, 200, 400 are unlikely to be impacted, but we are, and there's really nobody else except us. And while we don't have an objection generally to the idea of guidelines for purposes of the inevitable redevelopment of Beach Road, we do have specific complaints about some of the code changes that are reflected in these guidelines, and specifically the code changes as they relate to the increased setbacks and the increased parking requirements, the impact of which discourage redevelopment and in addition really diminish the value of our property. They also don't do anything to advance the stated purpose of these goals and guidelines. You can get all of the beautification you want without the setbacks and without the parking issue. You know, I've lived on Beach Road now for 10 years. These, with respect to the parking issues at the condos, I've not observed any parking issues within the condos. Most of the year, those spaces are basically empty. And in season, people park on the, you know, park within their lots. We don't understand why the code needs to be changed in these guidelines to add additional parking, because at the price point that these properties are being developed, okay, at the price point that these properties are being developed, the developers are going to put on sufficient parking to deal with their specific residents. And you've got a current code provision that requires 2 spaces anyway. The combination of the setbacks and the combination of the parking severely diminish the value of our property. And that's not theoretical. We actually have 2 offers to purchase our property. Both offers have said if this passed, these guidelines and setbacks pass, the offers are gone, because it makes the property essentially undevelopable from their standpoint. Because you take the setbacks and you squeeze the property, and then you put additional parking on, there's just not sufficient room to do the kind of development that these kinds of developers are doing. So both offers we've been told, are gone if you pass these things. So we've also asked about the setbacks, and we've asked the basis for them, and we've been told the numbers are arbitrary, they are what they are, but there's no empirical data behind them, and the parking, there's no parking study that's been done to back up the parking. So I understand my 3 minutes are up, and
Thank you, Mark.
I'll honor that request.
Oh, just, good.
Diane Easing.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Diane Ising. I am an owner at Island House Northeast. I've lived there for 17 years. I also visited for many years. I've known Jupiter and Tequesta, and I am I'm a Florida resident as well. I'm going to have to read because I'm not very good at public speaking. Please, I agree with everything that Mr. Bedeau said in his opening, and I would like to discuss the guidelines and the code. And the fact we perceive no problem at all and no reason for the draft guidelines and the code to be changed. I'll give you 2 examples. Number 1, the perceived problem has been one of aesthetics of the buildings and what they're going to look like. We believe that a new building is almost exclusively going to look better than our old building. And that is, we love Island House, but it was built in 1968, and virtually any new building will be an improvement, and we agree with that. That being said, excuse me, the new units will be selling, if a builder came in, they would be selling in the range of, I would say, $15 to $20 million. That alone is probably going to assure you that aesthetics are going to be taken care of. And I don't think that you really need to be, telling the builders, we don't have to tell them how to build the buildings. The people who are paying this kind of money as well are looking for beautiful landscaping, and that's what the builders will give them. When you're paying that kind of money, I don't really think that's an issue. In the words of one developer, any developer that would come in with a large capital buyout of an existing condo would have to design uniquely and eloquently to yield the highest potential sales prices for future units. Thus, we don't see any reason to change a code that is going to be taken care of. The second problem is parking, which Mr. Bedeau spoke about. Having lived in this building for 17 years, I can tell you we have never had a problem with parking. We have never had to park on the road. No one, to my knowledge, ever parks on Beach Road. We have 1 parking spot per owner and less than 1 visitor spot per owner. And we have never had a problem, as I said. Our parking spaces are less per unit than the spaces already mandated by the code for the new buildings. Also, our density is higher than the anticipated new buildings. Therefore, we don't see this as a problem. If the desire is to eliminate parking along Beach Road, that's a different issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Ising?
My name is Richard Ising, Diane's husband, and I've been living at 350 Beach Road for 17 years. I've been on the board for eight years, and I think I can speak for all the residents who aren't here being on the board. And we all feel aggrieved by the 2 points of the code change, the one being the setbacks and the second being the parking. And the feeling is that it is really taking from us physically and monetarily, and we don't see that as a necessary part of the code. And I want to just say I agree also with everything Mark said, and want to thank you for your time and thoughts.
Thank you.
Mary Beth Koch?
Hi, I'm not a public speaker either, so I'm going to read.
Could you please state your name and
Yes,
address for the
yes.
record?
My name is Mary Beth Koch, and I have been a very happy owner at Island House Northeast for the past 14 years. I also agree with Mark's comments very strongly. What I would like to talk today about is safety. The town of Tequesta's mission statement starts by stating, Tequesta's mission is to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the community. I'm sure that all the members here agree that safety must trump aesthetics in any actions the village council takes. Safety is on everyone's mind these days, given the disaster in Surfside. As you have pointed out, some of the buildings along the beach corridor are old. Ours was built in 1968, 54 years ago. This is a fact. These older buildings are constructed with uncoated rebar and porous concrete. We do periodically concrete repairs to replace the rusted rebar due to the salt exposure. This is also a fact. While we really love our building, at some point we know the building will have to be replaced with a new building that has new technology like coated rebar and redox inhibitors. Another fact. Newer buildings improve safety. The recent hurricane experience in Fort Myers shows that newer buildings survive hurricanes while older ones may not. I'm sure that we can all agree on this. Given that our building will need to be redeveloped at some point for safety, we ask the Village Council not to take any action that will unreasonably inhibit redevelopment. We ask that the Village Council not prioritize aesthetics and perceived problems, which are the goals of this project, over safety of newer buildings. The proposed setbacks and parking requirements do just that. Seek to prioritize perceived problems over future safety. Thus, we ask you to amend the draft guidelines to avoid the serious concerns that we have raised. Namely, we ask that 1, the village edit the draft guidelines to remove any new setbacks. 2, the village edit the draft guidelines to remove added parking requirements. Thank you all for all your time, and we appreciate your hearing our concerns and taking the time to seriously and thoroughly examine them.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
Mr. Pugh?
My name's Tyler Pugh. I'm a Florida resident and a Beach Road resident and owner at Island House Northeast. I've been in Florida for a little over 51 years. I agree with everything that Mark Bedeau just said and the other speakers have already said. I want to talk, however, about a specific item about property value reduction if you adopt these codes. The multiple setbacks included in the draft guidelines are effectively taking of existing owner property rights. These setbacks, along with new and unnecessary parking requirements, will reduce the value of our property substantially by reducing the redevelopable area. As we all know, redevelopment must occur for many reasons, including older, deteriorating buildings and improved safety. But the new setbacks and new parking requirements reduce our buildable area. We know that because we've had 2 offers from different developers, both of whom expressed opinions about what would happen if these codes are adopted. One of them said very specifically, and I quote, that these code changes would most likely decrease the development potential of the site by at least 15 to 20% just from the setback guidelines alone. A second developer said that these codes would most likely make our property completely uninteresting to anybody for redevelopment if they're adopted. This is a clear taking of property rights, those rights of existing owners and of taxpayers, and this is a clear decrease and a substantial decrease in our property values. Using prices paid for the 2 adjacent properties to Island House Northeast, a 20% reduction in developable property would equate to a $400,000 to a $500,000 loss of value for our owners at Island House Northeast, and it would be a clear government taking. The proposed codes don't really solve a problem. They create problems, and this does so at the expense of current property owners at Island House Northeast. We are finding it very difficult to tolerate this taking of our property. Again, we are asking that we've already said that you consider removing the draft guidelines that include setbacks, that you change the draft guidelines to remove added parking, as it will affect our values very seriously. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission, the village manager, and all of you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Butch Powell.
My name is Butch Powell. I live at Lamar, 375 Beach Road. I certainly understand the positions of a lot of the folks here with respect to the setbacks in particular. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that increased setbacks actually will allow more viewing space for residents, say, on the other side of the road, on the west side of the Beach Road as opposed to the east side. In general, I support the recommendations that have been made, and I'm going to defer further comment to one of my neighbors and someone who's much more familiar with this situation than I am, John Griffiths. He's on your list there. Thank you.
Lance?
I have John Griffiths.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Please state your name and address for the record.
I will. My name's John Griffiths. I live at Lamar, 375 Beach Road, and I'm also a board member of the Lamar Condominium Association. I think that we would all agree that this piece of real estate along Beach Road is arguably one of the finest, if not the finest, pieces of property in all of Tequesta and maybe up and down Treasure Coast. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us that we really are very careful about what the future redevelopment of any building is down there in order to ensure that we maintain the quality of life and just the day-to-day living that we all enjoy there. So, I would urge you and encourage you to think about that, not just one singular building, Island House Northeast, and their stated concerns, but all of the buildings and all of the residents up and down Beach Road that I think have the similar interest in maintaining our quality of life there. I would also like to congratulate the staff, city staff, that put this document together. I've been in the development business 40 years and have been a speaker and a commissioner as well. And this document is excellent. It addresses, I think, spot on what the items are that need to be addressed. And I hope that you approve it and submit it with recommendation to the City Commission, Village Commission for approval. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty Christopher.
I actually don't have this topic. I wanted to address the 250 building plans.
250 is not a part of this application.
Okay, then I'm going to pass through.
Okay. Sharon Wolfington.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Wolfington, also an owner and a resident at 350 Beach Road. Just wanted to mention that I've been here multiple generations, 3 generations in my family, and I'm hoping to have generations in the future stay in the area as well. I also want to comment that I agree with everything that's been said up to this point by the group over here. But specifically, I wanted to talk about a topic of redevelopment and trying to avoid inhibiting redevelopment. I would like to reinforce that enabling redevelopment achieves the aesthetic goals of the ordinance, and also inhibiting development distracts from multiple goals in the ordinance. I wanted to reference an article published in the Palm Beach Coast on November 14, 2022, where Tequesta leadership had expressed concerns that several buildings impacted by this ordinance were outdated, and according to the Village Council's workshop this summer, of the 12 condo buildings along the 1 mile corridor on South Beach Road, only 1 was built as late as the 1990s, all others dating back as far back as the 1960s, as referenced earlier. Also mentioned in this article that I thought was very interesting is the history of collaboration and cooperation between City Council and developers. The article outlined how redevelopment will benefit the Tequesta community by creating a community where the building quality matches the property value. That can only be achieved if the ordinances, specifically Ordinance 1522 and Ordinance 1622, do not inhibit redevelopment. 2 aspects specifically of the proposed ordinances will inhibit this, and that is the same ordinances, 1622 and 1522, for the existing outdated buildings, as well as, I want to make a point different than points have been made, also future aging buildings, because this ordinance would go into effect into the future as well. So again, specifically, the parking requirements and the new setbacks are of concern. These will clearly limit the options for redevelopment and therefore inhibit the redevelopment of those outdated buildings that were expressed as a concern by Tequesta leadership. Furthermore, inhibiting development may limit the ability to reduce density and optimize aesthetics, which is a goal of the ordinance. An example of redevelopment reducing density is the new development plan at 250 Beach Road, which will develop 34 residents versus the current 40, which is a reduction of density of 15%. We are asking that the ordinance avoid unreasonably inhibiting or discouraging development, should we choose to go in that direction.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Allison Dudley.
Hello, thank you all for your time this evening. I appreciate
Please
you
state your name and
I will.
address, please.
I appreciate you letting me speak. I'm Allison Dudley. I live in Island House Southwest. I'm across the street from my neighbors. I am a native of Florida. I grew up in Jupiter. I've lived in my unit over 20 years, and I've seen a lot in this area. I just want to thank you all for your what you've done on these ordinances. I do think the setbacks are important. I think also that we need to look at the overall picture of what Jupiter Island's going to look like and what Beach Road's going to look like, because I really hope we don't end up looking like Boca Raton or those people that are further down the road from us. I'd like to keep Jupiter lovely, and I'd like to have our beaches not feel like we're overwhelmed. I also think the setbacks are a little important when you look at all the things that were going on with this last storm that came through, because the king tides did come up pretty high and over our beaches, so we need to think about that. I would beg to differ. I know some buildings that are old have really done really well. They're through storms, and some buildings that are new have not done well. So I don't think the age of the building necessarily is relative always to the fact that the building is going to be detrimentally hurt by hurricanes. Again, I do respect, I apologize, I have a little different perspective, but I appreciate your time and I appreciate all your hard work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Brian Seymour?
Good evening again. For the record, Brian Seymour. I'm an attorney with the Gunster Law Firm on behalf of Island House Northeast. The short version of this is we're not saying don't do anything. We're saying give us a chance to talk about it. You've seen two issues. We can tell you the storm was not an issue. There was some splashing against a seawall, but nothing over the top at Island House Northeast. There's been no full evaluation of all of this with an opportunity for everybody to sit down. Specifically relative to the design guidelines, 1 week is certainly not enough. You've heard about setbacks and other things that have already been reviewed and a significant diminution in the property rights associated with Island House Northeast. The biggest problem with that is that it actually violates state law and your own comprehensive plan, which specifies that those property rights they're required to be considered in the evaluation, and we haven't had a chance to fully do that. We're not saying don't do anything. We're saying give us a little more time to sit down and say maybe there are alternatives to solve a problem if a problem actually exists. Some will stay, some may not, some may get modified, but the way to do this is to collaborate with everybody, including on the west side, including on the east side. And so what we're asking for is the opportunity to work through that, follow the comprehensive plan, follow the process, and it's a slight delay. We're asking for 1 month. We'll sit down. We'd like an opportunity to have an architect look at this. These are not just planning concepts. They are up. They go vertical, which means they're also specifically related to engineering and architects. So we'd like an architect to have a chance to look at the design guidelines. We already looked at some of the baseline on the setbacks, the parking, some of that, which specifically impact this parcel that do not impact the west parcel. So those things that we should be able to work through is all we're asking for, to see if there's a way to come up with something that actually works for everybody in the village. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I have no more comment cards for this agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe it's now appropriate for board discussion. I believe the consideration is for a motion for approval of the design guidelines.
So you're asking just for a motion for the Beach Road design guidelines?
I would first open
Yep.
the floor to board discussion.
Okay. Sherry?
I feel like there were a lot of public comments made about the legality or concerning questions about taking. So I'm curious if you can provide some legal opinion or background that might help inform our questions and thinking.
All I would say with regard to that is that this proposed guidelines, they would not be coming to you if they hadn't previously been vetted by staff, and believe that they are appropriate.
Thank you.
So then what you're saying is the request for additional time for these folks to actually review all of this or have further input is not, this can't be voted on contingent upon that. Is that what you're saying? That's right.
Well, board member, that would be at the discretion of the LPA. That's the point of the LPA board, is to take comments, to consider the things that are being presented to it. Your options really would be to approve, to deny, to send back to staff. It really is up to the discretion of the LPA.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So I know Nilsa and Lance had many discussions with developers and stakeholders in the community. I'm curious, I personally am asked to weigh on materials I read that are 80 pages in less than a week on a regular basis as part of my job. I'd love to understand if this developer didn't have or the owner didn't have an opportunity, or if you can speak to the number of folks that you did already speak with pertaining, to the new design guidelines.
Thank you for the question. As you all know, on October 3rd, there was a workshop and there was a presentation where we presented the design guidelines. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. At the October 3rd, again, there was a PowerPoint, and there was also on the website, anybody could have downloaded the design guidelines since October. So there was ample time to revise the guidelines, but it was for the purpose of this meeting, it was uploaded last week on Wednesday. And we also had met one-on-one with some of the HOA members who are tonight at the chamber.
Thank you.
Jeannie?
Yeah, I live at 275 Beach Road at Seamist, and I have not missed a meeting in a year. I am just a little bit surprised and concerned about all of the comments that I'm hearing tonight from this side. Is it just since you've been negotiating on your properties? Because I wish I'd heard all of this before. I heard from all of you, very eloquent speaking, and I think this is the most incredible proposal. I've never seen anything like this. It's just so well done. So I'm just sitting here surprised. And I hadn't heard, and that's why I wondered if it was just since your offer that there's all of this concern about this change.
Excuse me, hold on, please.
I mean, I've had so many calls, I can't even tell you.
So I think Mr.
Okay.
Bordeaux can answer the question.
Mr. Seymour, in the public comment section of this
It's not-
particular
There
item.
was a question asked directly.
Well, just have a seat, let the board finish what we need to do first.
I just want to
And
finish.
then if I feel that it should be reopened for comment from the public, I will ask, but let the board have their say at this point. Thank you. Go ahead,
I
Jeannie.
do get calls every single day, and I got a lot of calls today and yesterday from Island House Northeast and people they've spoken to, and with huge concern about the fact that this is going to change everything at our end of Jupiter Island. I even heard today about marinas, and I mean, I'm sitting here kind of in shock because I hadn't heard any of this before from anyone, that this will open it up to hotels and timeshares and marinas and changing everything. So as a Beach Road resident, I'm concerned now that I hadn't heard any of this whole year, that we've had people speaking about all of this. I had concerns, and and this seems to answer some of them with setbacks. Even things like landscaping. We see this fabulous landscaping, but no irrigation. I mean, I think this is all so necessary for the future of our beautiful end of Jupiter Island. I'm just not clear as to how this is all developing and whether it was because of negotiations or offers. I hadn't heard it before. Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Leslie.
Well, now, I mean, can we speak on like say parking?
Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yes,
you know,
have the floor.
I was alarmed, like Sea Glass, if I'm not mistaken, it was 26 units, and there's 4 parking spaces
For guests.
for guests. So where does the staff park? Where does the landscape people, the janitors, where do they park? You know, to me, that's disturbing. And this ordinance would only have increased the parking spaces 9 parking places. It can't be that difficult to make it a little bit smaller to have 9 parking spaces. So I think that the extra parking is critical for that building to operate. And, you know, you have, the dishwasher doesn't work, the repairman comes, where's he park?
Amazon.
But, yeah, Amazon.
Deliveries.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to come and fix.
They park on my side to deliver across the street.
That's what I'm thinking, that
There
they're gonna
was
have to
no
park in
room.
other lots just to, you know, so you have 4 parking spaces for 26 units, and, you know, where does everybody, all of the service personnel park? And that was my concern, and that's why I was happy to see increased parking. It's not that much, it's half a space per unit. And I think above a certain point, it was a quarter of a space per unit.
It's a quarter of
So-
a space after a certain amount of.
Yeah, but 9 spaces is just not that much. And I like the setbacks, I think it makes a more interesting skyline, and like the one person said, that it allows more see-through and just more open space for the other side. So that's my take on it.
Okay. I would like to give some of the people in the audience a little bit history of myself. I was on the village council when the Cliveden building was was presented to the village, and I asked them to delay it because he was doing it in August, and the people on Beach Road weren't available. So we made him come back at that point. And the people that are directly across were upset because it was obstructing their view. So we made some little bit of changes. And going back and knowing the history and hearing of the sale of buildings and developers, I had mentioned to Neil Sir at a meeting, at a planning and zoning meeting, that this is something that she needed to look at, Lance needed to look at, and the village needed, the council, our elected officials, needed to really address something like this. And this is something that I know that you have been working on for several years, because I brought it up about 2.5 years ago. I could not attend any of the meetings that were held for the residents of Beach Road, but I can say they did listen to my concerns on some of the design guidelines. They changed things. They listened to each one of us. We spent a long time going over all of this, and I really appreciate their time and their energy. And this is going to be a document that developers are going to have to adhere to what we basically want. Some developers I've known in the past, for some of these developments that come in that have been presented to the village council, and Leslie knows that they always ask for a special exception for here and there, we have a hard time. We really have a hard time going through that. And this document, I think, these guidelines just make it a little bit more difficult to ask for a special exception. And what we're looking at is something that will make the village, we are unique as it is. I want it to stay unique. And I think this will just definitely enhance everything.
Can I just add to that?
Pardon me?
I just wanted to add to yours in that, yes, Nilsa, Lance listened to us, but they also listened to all of you. I could see in this so much of what they've been listening to for a year or year and a half, I think. So I really do, I thank you both, because it wasn't just us, it certainly was all of you. And if there had been other opinions over the course of the year, maybe, but this is what we've heard. all of us. Thank you, Nilsa. Lance?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now, do we need a motion to approve?
At this point in time, it would be appropriate to call for action on this particular agenda item.
Is it a recommendation or?
It's a recommendation. So do I have a recommendation for approval for the Beach Road Design Guidelines?
I make a motion to recommend approval for the Beach Road guidelines.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Who's second?
Second, Gina.
Jeannie? Okay. Lance, could we have a roll call, please?
Elizabeth Shower,
Yes?
Leslie Dasher,
Yes.
Teresa Maggio,
Yes?
Sherry Ambrose,
Yes.
Jean Myeron.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I know that we're not always making everybody happy, and I apologize for that. The next item on our agenda is ordinance number 15-22. Go ahead, Dylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is ordinance 15-2022. Bear with me, I'm going to practice my speed reading skills this evening. This is an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta, Florida, amending the Village Code of Ordinances at Chapter 78 Zoning, Article 1 in general, Section 78-4 definitions to create a new definition for the term design guidelines. At Article 6, Schedule of District Regulations, Section 78-143, Schedule of Site Requirements, to revise the front, rear, and side yard setback requirements for the R3 zoning district. At Article 6, Schedule of District Regulations, Section 78-175, R3 multifamily dwelling district, to add the design guidelines to the regulations for the R3 zoning district, and at Article 9, Supplemental Regulations, Section 78-289, location of accessory buildings, to provide additional regulations for the accessory structures and buildings east of Beach Road. At Chapter 22, Community Development, Article 2, Community Appearance, to amend Section 22.82, General Requirements relative to site plan review, to incorporate the design guidelines into the architectural and aesthetic review for development and redevelopment in the R3 zoning district. And at Chapter 10, Animals, Article 3, Sea Turtle Protection, Section 10-67, Sea Turtle Protection Plan required to adopt Palm Beach County's turtle protection regulations, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 10, Animals, and Chapter 78, Zoning, shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date and for other purposes. The presenter for this is Nilsa Zacharias.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I will just present this ordinance. You have as part of your package. Please, we'll go through the page numbers. Page number 1 is the title of the ordinance.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Page number 1 is the title of the ordinance. Page number 2. So page number 3, as you all know, every time that the ordinance has underline, that will be new text, and if the ordinance has a strike through, that will be deleted from the current code. So on page number 3, we included the definition of design guidelines. On page number 4, with regard to the on the table, with regard to the R3 zoning district, we are proposing a code language for the front, side, and rear setback. So if you look at it, the front setback, the current setback is 20 feet. We are not changing the 20 feet setback on the front. What we are adding is as the building goes taller, then they will need to provide additional setback. That's for the front. For the side setback, as the code shows, that is 20 feet. So we do not change that. We are requesting again just 20 feet, and there are another adjustment that when the building goes high, we are requesting additional setback. Please note, the current code right now requests additional setback at 50 feet. So when the building goes to 50 feet, that's when the current code requires additional setback. So with regard to the rear setback, we are not changing the rear setback. As you see, there is nothing there, strike through or underline. we are adding a 5 feet setback from the 1979 construction control line. That's what we are adding, is underlined. So that's with regard to setbacks. Please, let's go through the next pages. There is nothing until page 8. Page 8, we added a section that says B, design guidelines. I'm not going to read all the sections, but I will read number 3. The proposed development incorporates elements and standards set forth in the beach design guidelines, which are adopted and incorporated within Appendix E, which shall be kept on file with the village clerk's office and community development offices and all other applicable ordinances. So that is the change on page 8. We'll continue. No changes on page 9. 13. On page 10, we added a language on section 78 to 89, which is location of accessory buildings. As we all know, all the buildings located on Beach Road, they have their accessory structure, which are the parking structures in front of the building. So we are including that on the code because right now the code does not allow any accessory buildings. However, we all know that that is the reality on Beach Road. So we are just, this is clarifying the code. So page 11, there is no changes. Page 13, we added number 14, which again, just introducing the design guidelines. It's just one paragraph, number 14. And then we also added on section 1067, Sea Turtle Protection Plan required, we added number 3. That is something that is already provided by the county, but we wanted to put in language, the village adheres to the county's turtle protection regulation as specified in Article 14, Chapter A of Palm Beach County ULDC. So that's with regard to the protection of the turtles. And those are all the changes proposed for this ordinance 15-22.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, there's actually 2 revisions to this particular ordinance. These are typographical errors. So on page 813, section 3, there's a typo. It states beach reach corridor. That is supposed to be beach road corridor. Likewise, on page 13 of the document, in section 14, once again, we have an appearance of beach reach corridor. That should be beach road corridor. So the ordinance for your consideration this evening is that which has just been presented with those 2 changes.
I missed that one.
I got one. I didn't see the second one.
Any comments from the board?
Madam Chair, first I would open up for public comment.
Okay, yes.
We have Maria Mies.
Hi, I'm Maria Mies. I am a resident, full-time resident at Island House Northeast. I was not going to speak tonight because of my accent, but I think it's very important to be able to address the question about why we didn't speak earlier, right? That was because we didn't know this was happening. It has nothing to do with any developer. This is because it is so important to us that these changes started supposedly as guidelines, right? That was the title, even for the meeting for June and October. It was design guidelines. It was only during the meeting in October where the mayor asked, but these are guidelines, and then it was said by Nilsa, who has been very kind to give us time later, no, these are code. This is very different. Guidelines, okay, we can talk about it, why not? Code, it has a tremendous impact on not just our building, all the buildings on, that they are going to get older over time. So that's why we didn't speak earlier. We didn't know. We didn't understand it was code. It wasn't said, it was said guidelines. But also we understand that it's by law. When you are going to change code, you need to have an impact study that has not been done. So we are surprised and amazed that we are going forward with something that doesn't have everything that is required. I understand on the west side, they want a better view. I understand that. We like it too for the intercoastal, but we are not coming to say here, change code or guidelines so we can enjoy a better view without understanding the impact to our neighbors. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Brian Seymour?
So I'm not going to say again everything that was said, but these are all sort of related, right? So that's why everybody didn't put in for 3 minutes each time. We'd be here till 9 o'clock tonight. Comments
That's
all
fine.
apply. Excuse me, Brian Seymour for the record. I forgot we were at a different hearing. And I'll do this again at the next one just to say the same thing. But all of the residents have all of the same opinions about all of this as it fits together. They are 3 separate ordinances, but they are all tied, right? They all affect the properties, and they all come together and have the impact. And again, yes, there was a PowerPoint presentation to discuss the guidelines, as you just heard. There was some confusion about it, which happens. And again, we're not saying don't do something. We're just asking for time. 1 more month hurts nobody. And we're not coming in with we don't have a contract. We're not coming in with a development. But 1 more month at least gives us the time to sit down and really evaluate and look at the formalized now guidelines that are going to be the code, right? A PowerPoint is not a code, but the code language that's now there, how it all fits together, what does it really mean so that we can really work through that? That's all we're asking.
Thank you. Lance,
I
anybody?
have no more cards.
This time would open up for board discussion.
Board?
This also would be a recommendation for us,
Yes.
so it won't be decided on until next month.
This is not the final stop.
No.
This would have to go in front of the
The
council
council, right.
prior
So-
to final adoption.
So we're not adopting this tonight. It won't be done for a few
Yes.
weeks, so
Correct.
there is time, but.
Anybody else on the board?
I've got a question. He raised the comment, Maria made a comment about an impact study requirement. Can you provide some background on that requirement and whether it is or is not triggered by what's being done tonight? Or being
Yes.
considered tonight?
Yes. So with regard to changing codes, changing code can be triggered for different scenarios. One of the very specific scenarios that have triggered code changes in this case is that we had 2 already developments on Beach Road that they did not provide enough guest parking. And also considering that the current village code does not have a provision requiring guest parking, then this was discussed by the village council, and they directed staff to put language together to address, guest parking requirements. So, and in order to propose this language, we look at it, many other municipalities, guest parking code. So I have a list of municipalities where we look at it. So it was not just done on a vacuum.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I'm inclined to agree with my fellow board member. I'm supportive of what's here, and it just is moving forward with the guidelines as we've already been supportive of.
Teresa?
I feel that this was well put together, and I don't think that it's unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable.
Okay, Jeannie?
I want to listen to everyone, and I thought that that's what we have been doing. And I, at this point, am in favor of everything here, really am.
Okay. My question to you is, if we were to reopen this and have them have that extra month, how does that impact anything? That's my question. I mean, personally, I like the way everything is right now. I've listened to them, and I hear where they're coming from, but I know all of the time that has been spent on this. And people talk, there's internet, there's Zoom meetings and everything. For them to say that they weren't aware of what was happening, I just have a hard time, because I know that there are so many people on the island that do Zoom and stuff like that. And to give them that extra month, I just don't feel it's necessary. But I just have that question to you, Dylan. I mean, as I'm the only one that's questioning the month, so could you just please give some type of advice?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, my advice really is that it's the LPA board's discretion, and I hate to say that, but that's really the whole point of the board, is to consider all these ideas and to talk about it and to provide recommendations and to make a recommendation. As far right now, this is in front of the board for action. And again, it's really the board's discretion whether it's something that you want to consider approving or give it more time.
No, I mean, we've spent an awful lot of time on this. I mean, working on it. It's been months. It's been over a year. Everybody knows what's going on Beach Road. So I honestly want to go forward, and I understand that they have objections, but there's always somebody that's always going to have an objection to anything. So, and I do apologize. I understand where everybody is coming from, but there's been a lot of time and effort spent in this, and I feel, I mean, I haven't spoken to anybody in the council, so you have the opportunity to also come back to your elected officials and tell them your grievances about the guidelines and that, and it would be up to them. So, all right, with that, may I have a motion for a recommendation to approve ordinance 15-22?
So moved.
Okay, so that is, oh God, I'm sorry. Sherry, may I have a second?
Second.
Jeannie. I'm sorry, Lance. I can't remember names right now, so could you do a roll call, please?
Elizabeth Shower?
Yes.
Leslie Dasher?
Yes.
Teresa Maggio?
Yes.
Sherry Ambrose?
Yes.
Jean Magadani?
Yes.
So 5-0 recommendation approved.
Thank you. Okay, the next one is item 16. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The third item on tonight's agenda is ordinance number 16-22. Once again, I'd like to ask you to bear with me. This one's a little bit shorter. This is an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Tequesta, Florida, amending the Village Code of Ordinances at Chapter 78 zoning. At Article 9, Supplemental Regulations, Section 78-333, Contents of Application, to require irrigation plans to be submitted in conjunction with landscape plans during the site plan review process. Section 78-393, Definitions, to revise the canopy tree definition. Section 78-397, Prohibited Plant Species, to revise the listed species names and add prohibited species. Section 78-402, Landscaping on single-family and duplex lots, to require landscape and irrigation plans. increase the palm tree height and require native trees and shrubs. Section 78-403, landscaping abutting residential areas, perimeter planting strip required. To revise the section heading and revise the wall, hedge, and landscape buffer requirements. Section 78-404, ground cover and trees and planting strips. To increase the required palm tree height. And section 78-409, landscaping around principal structures. To revise the landscaping regulations. And at Article 10, off-street and non-street parking and loading regulations. Section 78-705, required number of parking spaces. To increase the required number of parking spaces for multifamily dwelling developments over 20 dwelling units, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 78 zoning shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes.
Okay. All right.
I believe Nilsa had to step out.
Yes.
If Lance, would you like to provide a brief overview of the changes on this one?
Yes, sir. So as Nielsen stated earlier, strike through means that it's being taken out, underline means that it's being added, and if there's nothing that's being done, it's just regular, it's like. So page 2, that pertains to section 78-333, and that pertains to the requirement of adding irrigation plans in conjunction with the site plan review process.
Page
3 pertains to the definition and clarification of canopy trees. It adds a larger caliber of a tree and also provides like variety of stem, multi-stem trees and things of that nature. Section 78-397 is just an update to the prohibited plant species and some clarifications of the name of the plants. Page 4 is just a continuation of the prohibited plant species. Page 5 pertains to section 78-402, and that requires that landscape plans and irrigation plans provided prior to COs for single family and duplex lots. And also has some clarifications as far as the size of the trees, the height of the trees. Page 6 is another change. It's more so pertaining to the size of the requirement for landscape. So instead of being 1,000 square feet, it's going to be 500 square feet. So that pertains to shrubs and trees. And this is all for the single family section of the code. And also requires that a minimum of the shrubs and hedges need to be 50% native. Then we move down to the rest of that page. There's nothing that's being changed. Page 7, which is section 78-403, and what that more so pertains to is the buffers, the landscape buffers. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, it talks about a 15-foot buffer towards any public street, and a 10-foot buffer for adjacent property lines, so essentially the side property line, and the 15 feet would be the front property line. And it also talks about a 5-foot landscape buffer, which if you continue to page 8, talks about a 5-foot landscape buffer on the rear of the properties at a minimum of 40%. So 40% of the rear property line could be a combination of some type of landscape. It doesn't have to be the whole rear, but it's only 40% of that rear lot line. There's nothing more really on page 8. You continue to page
9.
Page 9 also has a clarification on section 78-404, and that's more so just a clarification of height. And then we have the section 78-409, which is the landscaping around principal structures. As you notice, that whole section has been struck through, and it continues to page 10, which talks about it's essentially foundation plantings. So providing foundation plantings around the building or the roof of the structure, and it talks about as the building exceeds 3 stories that it needs to require bigger trees, so 20-foot trees. There's nothing more on page 10, but it does start section 78-705, which is the number of required parking spaces.
Yeah.
As you see on page 11, letter C, Currently, the code contemplates 2 spaces per multifamily. This provision does add additional guest parking or visitor parking, and it mentions that it's half a space for the first 20 residential dwelling units and a quarter of a space for any additional units above 20 for guests or visitors. So essentially, if there was 32 units, the first 20 would require 10 guest parking, and then the additional 12 would require 3. So it'd be a total of 13 additional spaces. And that summarizes the rest of the ordinance.
Thank you, Lance.
And Mr. Steve Parker is also here. He was the landscape architect who does all of our reviews.
Where did he go?
Step.
Oh. He's high. I'm sorry, I didn't see him.
Yeah, he helped us instrumentally with anything pertaining to landscape. And that's all.
Steve, would you like to say anything to the board?
Oh, I suppose Steve Parker, for the record, landscape architect. I think Lance had a pretty good summary. I think we're just tightening up some aspects of the landscape code. There are a few things where we had different height requirements, and now we've kind of narrowed it down to one height requirement for trees. And in general, again, just kind of going through the code and tightening things up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any comments from the board?
Madam Chair, first I would
Oh.
recommend opening up the public comment section.
Any comments from the public for ordinance?
I know you're shocked, right?
No,
For the
you're
record,
fine,
Brian
Brian.
Seymour. Again, we don't want to take the time. We understand these are all related, same comments, so we have the same comments. We do ask again for the delay, so we have the opportunity to fully investigate, evaluate as impacting everybody, including the property rights here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
I don't have any additional cards.
Okay, board members? Okay, with that then, may I have a motion of recommendation for ordinance number 16-22?
I make a motion to recommend approval of
Ordinance 16.
Ordinance number 16-22.
May I have a second?
I second.
Jeannie seconds. Lance, a roll call, please.
Elizabeth Shower,
Yes.
Leslie Dasher,
Yes.
Jim Magbanel,
Yes.
Teresa Maggio,
Yes.
Sherry Ambrose.
Yes.
5-0 recommendation.
Thank you. Well, Nielsa isn't here. Do you have anything to comment, Lance? No comments? Does anyone have any other comments for the board other than what we've already addressed? Okay. All right. Are there any board comments? I just have one comment. Might not make everybody happy tonight, but I do wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And with
Same
that,
to you.
may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Roll call, please. Let's not stop that.
I didn't hear us. Sorry.
Jeannie, or who made?
Teresa.
Oh,
I made the
Teresa.
motion. I made the motion. And I second.
All right. Liz Shower,
Yes.
Leslie Dasher,
Yes.
Jean Magbanel,
Yes.
Teresa Maggio,
Yes.
Sherry Ambrose.
We are adjourned. Have a
Motion
great
passes.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Nobody leaves until the roll call's over. I'll be here all night.
I know you're going to be reading those.